All right, well, let's go ahead and get started. I've got four fantastic panelists with me here tonight, and they are all experts in their field and have a lot to say. So I'm sure that we're going to run out of time before we know it. And we're here tonight. We had actually finished all of the webinars and online events that we had scheduled for this campaign, and we realized, wait a second, we haven't done one on rebuilding after the fires, which is probably one of the most important topics. Throughout the campaign, I've heard about the issues we have with our county planning department. And I talked to a gentleman just last week who was just trying to build a new deck to replace his termite-ridden deck. And he's been down to the county planning department 6 times and still doesn't have a permit. And really doesn't know what's going on. So this is a huge issue in normal times, and the fires have really accentuated it. And we really wanted to put this on the calendar to make sure we addressed it during this period so that we can move forward on this issue with some momentum. And I firmly believe that we can solve the issues we have with our planning department, help people rebuild faster, and make ultimately a process that can become a new normal and really lead to, I think, a renaissance for our county in terms of housing, in terms of reinvestment in our community, and also in terms of sustainability and enabling also people to live more off-grid as well. So ultimately come in line with all of our values. So tonight, I'm hoping that with the help of these four excellent panelists, and Ken, I'm gonna see if I can get rid of your extra screen here without knocking you off, just because I keep thinking, like, wait a second, we've got 5 panelists. Okay, good, didn't boot you. I'm hoping that with the help of our 4 panelists tonight, we'll come away having a better sense of what we can do as citizens, but also what kind of policy changes would be helpful, both to help people rebuild after the fires, and also to help with our planning department and building departments going forward. So with that, I could introduce you guys, but I think probably it's best if you just say a little bit about yourselves, 1 to 2 minutes, and we'll go in alphabetical order of your last names. So if Robin Bolster Grant, why don't you start?
Hi, thank you so much for having me. It's an important topic. I am a land use attorney, currently have been for the last 2 years, but my career in Santa Cruz started almost 20 years ago. I worked for the planning department for 16 years, and I moved around in different sections within the planning department, from resource planning to code compliance to project planning. Worked on projects from subdivisions and commercial development to the little deck replacement, and not little, of course, to the people who are trying to get them. But last year with the county, I was tapped to be the cannabis licensing manager. So I've also dealt with the cannabis industry and the challenges that go with developing a new program and new policies as we go. So that's been an interesting experiment, but I know how permitting and the permitting process over at the county, and I can share based on my experience. So thanks very much.
Thanks, Robin. Marilyn Crenshaw, thanks for coming tonight. What's your experience?
Yeah, thanks, Manu. Let's see, I started being a drafter building designer back in 1977. I got my architecture license in 1990. I've always been based in Santa Cruz. I've worked on hundreds and hundreds of every kind of project, from big to little. I chaired the City of Santa Cruz Green Building Working Group, and the Green Building Code we started with became the California Green Building Code. So my website morphed from the green architect to the green and blue architect. Water's everything water touches in the built environment. I've done many disaster rebuilds over the years, from trees destroying houses to fires, and I did a few rebuilds after the Harbin fire up in Lake County.
That's great.
And I'll let somebody else go
Yeah.
now.
Yeah. So you really know how the process that's required for people to rebuild, and also how arduous it can be. So I'm glad you're here to share your experience with us. Thanks, Marilyn. Yeah, Ken Hart.
Thanks for the opportunity. Nice to be here tonight. I worked for the County of Santa Cruz from 1980 to the end of 2016, so 36 years. In my last 25 years, I think, with the department, I was the manager for the environmental planning section, soils, geology, biotic issues. And then I went over to the black sheep of the department, code compliance.
Ooh.
So and then I finished out my career though as one of the managers of the development review section, all the zoning, similar to what Robin was mentioning, use permits, commercial development permits. And in the end of 2016, I left the county and came to work for Swift Consulting Services. John Swift has been involved in the planning world, gosh, for the past 25, 30 years, and is a wealth of knowledge. And so currently we do all the kinds of planning, entitlements, feasibility analysis that you can think of, including dealing with red tags and trying to get red tags removed. So that's my area of expertise, if you will.
That's awesome. Thank you, Ken. And last but not least, Brad Sherwood, dialing in from Sonoma. Thank you so much for dialing in, Brad.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Manu, for this opportunity to help spread what I've learned as a wildfire survivor. My family and I lost our home in the 2017 Cubs fire. Our home is located just north of Santa Rosa in the unincorporated area of Larkfield. First off, I gotta say, absolutely love Santa Cruz. We actually just got back. My family and I went to the KOA there for the first time 2 weeks ago. Had a fantastic time. And right before the pandemic hit, we spent the week in Santa Cruz at the boardwalk, and that was our last family outing. So we have fantastic memories and absolutely love your county, and just a wonderful place to be. So I am happy to be here to share what I have learned as a wildfire survivor. I also work for the Sonoma County Water Agency. I manage our government affairs program. And I'm also a block captain, a program that was developed after the Tubbs fire. It's all about transparency, communications, and working with county leaders to implement prudent rebuild policies. So I'm happy to discuss with you all about those opportunities later tonight.
Great. Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Brad. It's fantastic to have both your experience as a survivor and a block captain, as well as your role in local government. Well, let's dive into first understanding how we can really help expedite the process of rebuilding for fire victims. And maybe for starters, you should understand, well, what does the process look like today? Over 900 homes have been destroyed, 1,500 structures, probably a lot, which were being used as homes. What are these people facing in terms of the path to rebuilding and even just occupying their properties again? Anyone in particular want to take that question, or
Well,
I know you.
Go ahead, Ken. Well, I was just going to say, I think right now, as far as I know, nobody's been in a position to actually, or very few, if any, folks have been in a position to actually apply for permits. I think the vast majority of the properties impacted are going through this phase 1 assessment to see if their properties have hazardous materials that would preclude them from being there for health and safety reasons. Last I looked, out of the 900 plus homes, not counting the commercial buildings and non-habitable structures, I think 22 or 25% of all of the properties have actually completed that phase 1 environmental assessment. So a lot of folks are still, they're still spinning their wheels trying to get that. And I get that it's a necessary component, but it's taken a while. And once they pass through that, there are many other hurdles that folks are going to need to get through before they can even submit plans. So, and we can talk about the various hurdles. Again, it's hard to argue about their necessity to have a safe place to repopulate. But one of the issues that I'm starting to get calls about has to do with folks trying to get some sort of temporary shelter, temporary permits to either occupy the property where their house was, to occupy properties that were not even affected by the fires, and just finding a place to live is a real struggle right now, and has been obviously for the past 2 months.
Well, and just to be clear on that point, Robin, in order to get a temporary permit for going back onto the property, it has to be cleared for the hazardous materials review that FEMA and EPA are doing, and the water system has to be cleared as well.
Right. And I would imagine septic, there has to be, unless it's self-contained in an RV or something along those lines, all of the utilities that you would need for a house have to be supplied. One of the bigger problems, and we can get into this a bit later, the nature of development in our mountains, and many of these communities were started out as summer cabins built 100 years ago, and they've evolved sort of organically over time. And one of the hurdles people are going to have to face is bringing those kinds of properties up to current standards, finding records that may or may not exist, that sort of provide a framework for what was there, what was permitted, what wasn't. But the cost of bringing even just the properties, never mind the new structures that may or may not be built, bringing those up to current standards will be cost prohibitive for a lot of folks.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're getting at this kind of contradiction or fundamental challenge in just reoccupying, as you say. I mean, a lot of people lived on places like Last Chance Road to be as far away from the status quo as possible, to be off grid, to live in harmony with nature. And now we're saying that just to reoccupy, you've got to have a PG&E connection, and you've got to have I believe it's connected to the water system or a functional septic system, and both of those, it seems, with the PG&E connection, it's like, well, wait, I mean, aren't the power lines problematic? Why wouldn't we want to be encouraging people to be independent with solar panels or something? And then, even with septic, we've dealt with a ton of challenges in the county. Our local area management plan to permit septic systems is not even current with the state. Hey, Catalina is behind you, Marilyn. That was cute. And so it's pretty long and arduous to even get a septic system approved. And so it's like, well, what about new technology like composting toilets or incinerating toilets, or even something like a porta potty? Can those be considered as things that you could have in order to just to reoccupy your property? I mean, today, none of that's legal, right?
Correct.
So I have a comment. I attended a webinar that was put on by Monterey, and it was when the fires weren't even over yet, right? And they were already saying on the webinar that with the RV and a porta potty, the kind you put on a construction site, right, and you hire the people to come once a week and pump out the porta potty, they were giving everybody instant, like, fine, go live on your property again. Like, why can't County of Santa Cruz do that? Why can't they network with the Monterey County people to say, hey, how'd you guys arrive at this would be an okay solution?
We had a similar experience in Sonoma County. Our board of supervisors 2 months after the fire, immediately created the Office of Recovery and Resiliency. And it was staffed out of our county administrator's office. And we had 4 dedicated staff members who immediately worked with our permitting department to open up a separate rebuild permitting center that was ran by a consultant. So we had our own dedicated permitting staff, and we did just that, like you just said. It was about getting people back onto their properties, and it was about working with regional and state officials to do whatever it took to get people back home. And we did a ton of those type of situations, and it worked, and it got people back on their properties while they were rebuilding.
Well, I know this county of Santa Cruz, after the 1989 Loma Prieta earthquake, the planning department set up it was an earthquake unit, separate and apart, and even off-site from the planning department itself, to deal with the issues of recovery from the earthquake, similar to what you were talking about, Brad.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we also here in this county have just created the Office of Recovery and Resilience, and I believe that is the current plan forward, is to hire some consultants in order to improve the pace at which we're able to process some of these applications. So
Yeah.
I mean, I know we're definitely looking at the Sonoma playbook. Yeah, but even then, is there some, it seems like there is also more though that we could do in terms of accommodating off-grid living.
So I have some comments. So one of the things when you rebuild after a disaster is that when you rebuild, you have to meet all the current codes. You can't build your ancient building that was built under no codes or an older code. So we have like new structural energy codes, fire codes, and so whatever you build, just the bones of it has to meet today's codes. And so they call that rebuild in kind. But in my mind, it's like, why can't you do off-grid? Why can't you do solar and batteries? Why do you have to have a PG&E connection at all, right? And if you have a well, or you do or you have water catchment, or you even bring in tanked water, like on the temporary basis, why not? But right before this call, I looked on the county website about temporary permits. And if you even want to get a temporary permit, you have to have a foundation design of how you're tying that temporary structure to the ground. It's just like their list of paperwork seems huge. It's not a quickie, oh, drive your RV up there and rent a porta potty and have a solar panel and a generator. They're just not making it that easy. And when all of this started, meaning when the fires were barely ending, I'd heard that you weren't necessarily going to have a soil engineer. And now on the county fire rebuilding page, it's mandatory. Everybody needs a soil engineer. And like, sure, if you had a soil report before and those soil engineers still have an office, you can have a plan review letter. But when all of a sudden you've got all these permits that people are applying for, and you still have the rest of the county of non-fire constructions trying to get a permit. So Manu, you keep asking, like, how can we speed it up? And in my mind, because the insurance business does this all the time, they do peer review for firms. Like, why can't architects plan check other architects' plans, and engineers plan check other engineers' documents? And because all of us, when we prepare plans, we know what the standard list of required information is because we do it all the time. So we're in a position to sign a document that said, yep, they had everything on it. But if the county thinks they're just going to go hire all these outsourced plan checkers and staff to do plan check, and then they have to train them, it's just going to be slow. It's like if we reinvent a new innovative system and we have equal licensed consultants, peer review style plan check other consultants' documents, it just seems like we could use all our local people and speed it up.
You're bringing up a really
So
important
that's
point,
my
Marilyn,
suggestion.
and I do want to address that. But before we really get into fundamental changes that we could make with the planning department, I want to make sure we cover off this issue of how do we get people at least even with some sort of temporary rehabilitation of their property. And so what I've got so far from our conversation is, allow off-grid, like solar panels for power or something, or even maybe generators. Pilot a composting toilet program or incinerating toilet program, like Brad, you were sharing me that Sonoma County has. And maybe the third big piece is legalize tiny homes in the county in general, so that people can think about that as a first step, or maybe even a long-term strategy to moving back on their property. Are those three kind of the big things? Is there anything that any of you would add to that in terms of allowing people to move back to the property quickly?
There was one other point raised, and I think it's a good one. I think Marilyn, you raised it, was the use of porta potties. I mean, not everyone wants a composting toilet necessarily.
Sure.
But I know that for say outdoor cannabis cultivation, that environmental health does allow during harvest time the use of porta potties. You have to get a contract with a vendor, and they have to say how often they're going to empty it and clean it. But I don't see why that shouldn't be able to be applied to the fire, getting people back onto their properties.
Absolutely, quick and easy. We would need a change right now. They limit the time where you can have the porta potty on your property, I think 10 days or 2 weeks or something like that. So but that's a minor change. I think for any of these, all of these ideas to work though, it really is going to come down to coordination among all of the different agencies who tend to act completely independently and not in concert. And the county hired Matt Machado. I think he's right now he's just working in public works. But the idea was that Matt or somebody like that would be sort of in charge of coordinating all of the land use agencies, so environmental health, public works, and planning, and make sure that they're all rowing in the same direction. That hasn't happened yet. That was envisioned, I think, a couple of years ago, but something like that does need to happen. I think they're moving toward that, but otherwise, all of this, without that centralized coordination, one point of contact, if you're having a problem, otherwise it's same old.
Yeah, I've heard that from a lot of people, is that we just need to get these different departments on the same floor so that you can walk in and see all of them at once, and that they also are talking to each other more easily. And I know Marilyn, you've definitely suggested that to me. Yeah. Yeah, Marilyn.
So I just had this kind of queuing off what Robin was saying. How come each county has to invent the wheel on their own? Why can't we have this California collaborative group that's just about fire rebuilding, and we get Monterey, because they have some good solutions. We get Sonoma, Santa Rosa, Lake County. We even get some of the Southern California cities, Fresno, because all over California, we're having burning. And when we were we had the Green Building Working Group, we got one member from every single jurisdiction in the state of California. And we had these, at that time, it was just once every 3 months, we'd have a meeting with a representative from every jurisdiction, and we'd all talk about how can we collectively implement green building. Well, what if we had a fire recovery working group, and we get all these jurisdictions together, and they all can organically learn from each other on solutions they've come up with. How did their city attorney figure out that porta potties worked, you know, pumped water tanks worked, RV, you know, whatever. But if you don't have that, because if you add up how many homes were ruined in all these fires, I'm sure easy we're pushing 10,000, right? And collectively, we could invent the new normal if all these counties were networking together.
Is there anything that is like that exists today? Brad, have you worked with any arm of the state or any sort of super, you know, inter-county working group?
Yeah, the only organization I can think of that's really taken a advanced role in that would be the California State Association of Counties. They have definitely helped develop some draft policies and worked on wildfire rebuild policies. But I mean, I'll be honest, let's kick it off here. I mean, I think it's a great idea.
Yep.
Right. I mean, yeah. Go ahead, Ken.
Well, I think it's a great idea as well. And regardless of the plan that is developed, the execution is critical, right? And that's where, like Robin said, there needs to be much better communication, coordination between the departments and the reviewers. My last couple years with the county, I was asked by the county administrative officer to be the permit center coordinator to help, you know, coordinate the land use program of the different departments. Problem was I was given the responsibility, but not the authority, right? So, and this is an idea that's been kicked around for a long, long time. The siloing of the different reviewers, and people rarely talk to one another, and the daunting task of the applicant to have to chase down each individual reviewer, which now with COVID is even more difficult. There does, and Robin mentioned the single point of contact. I think that would be critical, and someone who can make the decision to say, you know what, this set of, or this particular requirement is, you know, over the top, and we're not going to go there. We're going to dial it back to something more reasonable. That kind of coordination is, I think, key, regardless whether it's fire recovery or just, you know, planning department and the county land use regulatory program moving forward.
So Ken, you're saying that as an applicant, I should have just a single point of contact with the county who's able to, you know, check on my progress all the way through with each department.
Yes, and I think that it's kind of a sea change in the thinking and in the terms of the philosophy that, you know, there's this this notion that, oh, we can't advocate for a project. Well, where do you draw the line between support and
service?
and customer service, right?
Yeah.
Right.
And so, would that be a new position located in the building department, or would it be just a different way for planners to think about their role? What do you think makes the most sense?
I think the planners could think, and the other people who are involved in commenting could think differently about their role, because at the end of the day, any regulation that you write cannot fit every single situation that's out there, and so you need to have people who can do the best fit for the situation at hand and have the discretion to be able to apply the decision that they make. Now, I think Robin mentioned, you know, Matt Machado, Public Works Director, was hired, I think, with the notion that he would maybe head up the super land use regulatory agency. I don't know where that is, if it's still on the table, but I think it's going to take someone who, you know, Matt, I don't think would be able to get down in the trenches, you know, on these kinds of things. And so it would take one or maybe more people who not only have the responsibility, but the authority, right, to be able to make those calls. And I don't know if that resides with the county administrative office to be able to, you know, even, you know, direct a department head to have their staff dial down on some of their requirements. So,
Robin, you're nodding a lot. How's
Yeah.
the best? What do you
Yes.
think is the best way to get the departments to
Well,
work together?
So I think it does have to be either within the CAO's office and have the authority that goes with the CAO, or somebody. I was so Matt Machado and that role is moving forward. I talked to somebody in Public Works just last week who said that is still the vision in their continuing improvement or whatever the sort of buzzwords for improving the process over there at the county. But I think that person or subgroup, working group, whatever it is, does have to be on the 5th floor to have that authority over department heads, because competing department heads are still sort of hanging on to their little fiefdoms, and it's not a knock on individuals. It's a culture that it's taken decades to sort of foster and calcify. So I think it does have to be somebody above. It could be an analyst in the CAO's office that is dedicated to that. But they have to be in a position where they can tell the department heads what to do. And
What's
yeah.
CAO?
The county administrative office. So that's used to be right for years and years and years. That was Susan Moriello. Now that's Carlos Palacios, and he's got a number of deputies and analysts and stuff. And I think somebody who is charged with that specific oversight. I think it has to reside up there because, yeah, we don't want power plays, which we see between department heads overseeing land use. We need somebody to make the call above them.
I don't want to beat this horse too much, but I know that when I was in planning going way back, and Robin, I know that you had shared a lot of these same concerns. There's a couple very basic tenets with land use regulation, nexus and proportionality, and I'm a broken record, and sorry to subject you to this again, Robin, but there has to be a connection between what you're requiring and what the application is for, and that requirement has to be proportional to what the impact is.
Right.
And very few people, I think the planning department gets it, but I think outside of planning, very few people really understand that. So what you have is there's a kind of an expectation of perfection. When you apply for a permit, everything on the property is looked at and everything needs to come up to today's standards and requirements. So sometimes, if it's a life safety issue, I think that makes sense, but so often it's not. And so I think that that's something that really needs to be, there needs to be a training program for the reviewers, and there needs to be kind of a change in the philosophy about land use regulation. And that's a hard thing to, when you're talking about how a department operates,
Right. The
and
culture.
how people bring their own, the staff bring their own attitudes and philosophies to it. It's a really hard thing to change the direction. It wouldn't be something that could happen overnight, but it's probably a years long effort.
Right. Yeah. So Ken, I think you're getting into, again, this idea of, okay, well, what is the actual work that needs to be done? I mean, we've got the sense now, all right, we've got to get the different departments collaborating more efficiently. We've got to have a line right to the top, to the CAO's office, to make sure the authority is there. And now we're kind of getting back to this original point that Marilyn was making too, of, well, how do we change the actual work of reviewing and issuing permits? Is it creating a peer review system, or another suggestion I've heard from a local developer is we just need the super stamp model, right? Because we've already got state licensed architect, structural engineer, electrician. These people all have errors and emissions insurance. They're all stamping off on these plans. And so the county should really just be in the role of saying, all right, check, check, check. You got our stamp too. Is that, is that even feasible? What's the most sort of logical transition here, so that rather than trying to review 1,500 permits and hire enough consultants to possibly do that while putting all the other applications on hold to build anything in the county, how do we make the actual work more manageable?
Beyond, I mean, that's really a political sort of, and I have many, and Ken does too, many examples of where we have asked for exactly that on, setting aside the fire rebuild issue, where folks with stamps and licenses and E&O insurance and the rest have submitted work, and no, we want this. No, we want, but it's not quite there. It's not quite there. It's not quite there. Iteration after iteration, we've asked for peer review, and I'm thinking specifically about technical reports, the geotechnical and geology reports, maybe structural, anything requiring a license, and that's a huge cultural shift to just accept that somebody else is as qualified as you are to say, this structure or this retaining wall or whatever meets the standards. Quit arguing about it, and just go with it. That would be huge. That would take literally sort of an edict from above to say thou shalt. Ideally, it would be codified. I would love to have the peer review process all by itself in our code, and that would give, because that's really what we're talking about. We're talking about folks that, well-meaning by and large, that have their heads buried in the code, and it says right here it needs to be a colon and not a semicolon, and you say, get your head up, look at the project, look at the context, and what are we really trying to get at here? And so we either codify everything, which we've tried, or we just give individual planners and the staff, line staff, as Ken said, the authority and the discretion to make these calls and to accept this work. It is part of the problem. Part of the reason we don't have that right now is that there's not great communication, not only between agencies and departments, but within the departments, from the top to the line staff. Ken's work was, checking in with the planners doing their day-to-day work, and that simply doesn't happen. Doesn't happen now, and I think that that's common throughout many other departments.
Brad, was there anything that Sonoma County did during your process of rebuilding that just made it, expedited the process of rebuilding your home? I mean, you said it took you about 2 years to rebuild, 2.5.
Yeah, so our neighborhood, we worked with kind of a group rebuild process. So we worked with a company called Stonefield Development. They're out of Orange County. They've rebuilt communities, I think, in 4 other fires, starting in San Diego. So these developers, these builders, they knew what they were doing. They rebuilt in the crazy fire environment and the policy issues and insurance issues. So they did an awesome job of working with our ORR department, Office of Recovery and Resilience. So what the county did is they had, for our neighborhood at least, of 160 homes, they had 2 inspectors who were dedicated to our neighborhood. And that may seem like a lot or a little, I don't know, but it worked out amazingly. We've had the same 2 inspectors since they were hired on by the Resiliency Permit Center. And it was them, they were literally, John was our inspector's name. He was the catalyst and the go-to for connecting our builder with every permit and process needed. And that streamlined the process for our builder. It streamlined the process for all of our subcontractors who were installing sewer, or who were doing other infrastructure upgrades in the neighborhood. So that worked out really well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, what struck me, you were saying how you would have this builder, if you had families like 5 that agreed to the same design or something like that, then okay, that design would be kind of rolled out.
Right.
And it strikes me, we've talked about, I believe San Diego has, created catalogs of pre-approved ADU designs. And really, we're talking about the same thing here is expediting the process for people to rebuild by just having pre-approved plans
Yep.
for certain models.
Yeah, we were able to, with Stonefield Development, we rebuilt about 180 homes through that process, where we had coordinated planning, coordinated permits, and we had a whole schedule for how the build was going to roll out. So the county inspectors knew where they were in each phase. It was very beneficial, and it saved us wildfire survivors a hell of a lot of money too, by the way, because time is money when it comes to rebuilding, especially when you have to meet the insurance deadlines.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I want to make sure we save some time for audience questions. And so I'm going to jump around a little bit, but Brad, I want you to, if you could also talk about the block captain program and, some of the things that your neighborhood did just to stay together as a neighborhood through the process of rebuilding. And, of course, that has implications even for neighborhoods that are still there today, but, are looking at better preparedness for future wildfires.
Sure. So right after the fire, our county supervisor, James Gore, created a block captain program. We called him our chief. We were his captains. We met with him every Wednesday morning at 7 a.m. for 2 years.
Wow.
And essentially the chain of command was like this. You had the board of supervisors, CAO, office of recovery, and then bam, block captains. And it was our goal and our job to ensure that our neighbors receive timely, efficient information on everything rebuild related. And what was fantastic about that is, we too were a fairly rural community. We're all on half-acre lots, unincorporated. We don't have a community services district. We're pretty old school, unincorporated Sonoma County, right? And we were very sleepy, and everyone kept to themselves. A lot of long-time property owners who'd lived in their same home for 45, 50 years. But man, the fire just sparked this new rebirth of life in this community. And it was through this block captain program that we developed our own community website. We developed our own nonprofit, 501c3. I would highly encourage, if you have a community that maybe needs some funding support, create a 501c3 so you can leverage grant opportunities. Right now, there are other nonprofits and major businesses such as FedEx who want to donate and give. And they want to give to the survivors. And if you can do that, it takes a couple $1,000s to start a 501c3. And just in the 2 years we've been in existence, we've already generated close to $1 million in leveraged grant funding. And that's helped us rebuild our perimeter fence, bring in sewer. We've replanted over 1,000 trees. So it's just a fantastic way to build a community and leverage opportunities, the block captain program.
Right, and it's something that we can do proactively too.
Absolutely. It's something everyone can pitch in and help with.
Yeah, that's awesome. All right, well, go ahead.
The other thing that I think that property owners can do to help themselves is, I know that they've been advised that they can get their assessor's permit records and environmental health records, to do that as soon as possible, because I know that having looked at hundreds of sets of those records, there's a lot of vagary involved and they're not perfect. So questions will come up and you need to be able to have those questions addressed. The other thing is, if the county does require soils reports. I've been on the phone with some of the soils engineers, and there's a limited number of drill rigs in the county for getting out and, boring doing the soil logs. And if there could be some coordination there on, like, say, one neighborhood could get together and coordinate so that a drill rig could be sent out to that area rather than having to go, one house here and then another house here. I think, and the soils engineers have said that that would save a lot of time, because at the end of the day, the design community is going to be overwhelmed.
Mm-hmm.
Ken, that saved us so much money. By doing our group rebuild with Stonefield, that saved a ton of money. And that spans across everything up to even landscaping requirements and finding good deals on landscapers. Having that group rebuild mentality, it is absolutely necessary. Folks who are still not in their home right now in Sonoma County are not part of a group rebuild effort. And they're not back in their homes yet. And every group rebuild effort that I know of is completed, and people are back in their homes.
Wow. Yeah. So huge economies of scale and in working together as a community in terms of rebuilding your home, getting the soils report and done. It sounds like even maybe to some extent getting records together, raising funds for community projects, like, whatever it is, wall around the community, in your case, Brad, or others. So, right, work together. It seems like, I think that's the biggest takeaway I'm hearing as far as what citizens can do. It's, organize your neighborhood and let's, establish this block captain program and see who's willing to create the information network.
I think it's also just good policy making to keep your wildfire survivors included in those policy discussions. And that's what the block captain program also did. I mean, we take a huge amount of pride and ownership in helping drive the county policy from this point forward. And it's amazing how you as a wildfire survivor, you really do awaken and you stay woke and you stay aware and you want to be involved in your community. And moving forward, I mean, even start thinking right now, what are we going to do to prevent this? What are we going to do to save and prevent other members of our community from becoming a member of the Wildfire Survivor Club? We don't want any more members. The club is closed.
Right. Yeah, that's fantastic. Let's see. I've got just a couple questions here from the audience. The first one is about mudslides. From Cheryl. Yes, we definitely talking about what the technical term is debris flows, because it's so much more than just mud. And, I think anyone living in any of these affected areas really needs to be prepared to evacuate multiple times throughout the winter, right? I mean, it could be that the first time you evacuate, nothing happens. The second time you evacuate, nothing happens. But debris flows happen extremely quickly, and they're extremely deadly. So I think the primary message is, yes, the county is absolutely mapped out some of the high-risk areas for this. I think we all learned from the Montecito example that this is a huge risk to many people's lives, and will be definitely, you'll see some evacuation warnings throughout the winter on this. Another question is, how do you test for toxins in the soil and well water so you can safely have a food garden again? That's a great question. Is that part of any of the debris cleanup that happens? I mean, I know, so you mentioned phase 1, Robin, and then there's phase 2, which the state is, I understand, going to be assisting with in terms of funding. At any point in there, is there any testing of the soil or well water, or is that something that basically the property owner has to take on themselves?
Are would be tasked with that if somebody has reason to be concerned about leaching of any of those chemicals into the groundwater. There are a number of folks that do that, but that's not what the phase 1 or phase 2 is designed for. As far as I know, there may be, I don't know if Ken, if you've heard about anything beyond just, you know, what they can see on the surface. I'm not aware of anything that would be more invasive or intense than just what they can see.
Not in terms of soil testing. I do know that Soil Control Lab in Watsonville, they do water testing. They may do soil testing as well. I think there's a firm out of Salinas as well that does the same thing. But I think people, I've referred a couple people to Soil Control Lab who are concerned about their water system and the fact that their tank had gotten pretty darn hot. And I think that environmental health is recommending or requiring that people do that.
Right. Brad, you work for Sonoma Water. What, you know, who should be testing their water, and for who might their water be, you know, safe?
Yeah, I mean, I'd have to echo everyone's comments here. It's a private property owner deal. You know, we're a county wholesaler, so we sell our water to the cities and water districts. But you know, having known many wildfire survivors with their own wells, community well systems, yeah, it's a costly uphill battle, quite frankly. And depending on what their insurance coverage is, it could be a determining factor to rebuild or not. So unfortunately, that's one of the prices we pay for living in a rural, beautiful part of the world, is when you're off grid or if you're on your own septic and well system. You know, that's unfortunately just part of life, and it's up to the private property owner and your county environmental health departments primarily.
Got it. All right, just one of the costs of rebuilding.
Yep.
All right, so question from a friend who wants to rebuild after phase 1, but before phase 2 of the cleanup. Why can't we get a meter release inspection permit for temporary power using a construction type setup? So I think we're talking about, getting power if there's an existing meter. Presumably PG&E already, you know, has lines there.
So is the question whether why couldn't a temporary meter be approved for the temporary housing that people want to use to get back on their property?
I think that's or during construction of you know, a structure. So yeah, a meter release inspection permit.
Yeah, during construction, yeah, it's temporary meters are allowed, and even, you know, without, you know, before the fire, you could get a permit to reside on the property in a mobile home once your building permit was issued. I think the county needs to look at that and you know, move that forward way before the building permit's issued.
Right, but I agree that it would be a significant help for folks to be able to move forward after the phase 1, but before phase 2 necessarily being completed. My understanding is phase 1 is hazardous material. Phase 2 are other types of material that are not toxic or overtly hazardous. So I'm not sure why anybody should be held up before the phase 2 is completed.
Right.
But that's a really good question for the county.
Right, and can't property
policy? Yeah, go ahead.
Right, and can't property owners themselves apply to do the phase 2, some of the phase 2 cleanup?
That's my understanding.
The debris removal?
Yeah.
They can. It's costly when the county has said that if you apply to them and you're part of that coordinated effort, that there's not supposed to be any cost to you. And typically, debris removal provisions in homeowners insurance are pretty lacking.
Okay.
So on the one hand, it would say it's going to save people a lot of money. On the other hand, you're on the community time scale as to when they would get to you.
Right.
Yeah, we did the public Army Corps cleanup in our fire, and I think they billed the county roughly $300,000 for the cleanup of my property, which is a 1/4 acre.
Whoa.
And then my insurance company said, nope, we only have enough coverage for $125,000. And then I got a separate bill balance from the county for my share of it. So that's all still being worked out.
I think the
Wow.
program that I've heard described is if you sign up for this coordinated effort, you agree that you're going to sign over any kind of payment from your insurance company to the county as your
true.
company, but no more.
Mm-hmm.
That's
What
true.
we signed up for. Yep.
Got it.
Hey,
Uh,
hey,
Yeah, go ahead, Marilyn.
so there's a little bit of an elephant in the room we haven't talked about. And I'm just citing my helping prior Lake County fire victims, as well as friends who've had settlements over the years. But usually your homeowner's insurance, you have some kind of a loss of use that covers maybe 2 years of temporary housing. And then they go, okay, that's it. That's all you get. And this ridiculous process of how long everything takes, I mean, at this point, with plan checking and getting in line for design professionals, once people are ready to hire architects and engineers, and then the county processing it, they'll be lucky if they can even start construction in 2 years. And then construction's going to go another year, and people are going to be bleeding economic losses because their insurance isn't covering any more temporary housing. It's like they're just, the elephant in the room is that the county and ideally a statewide, rebuild resiliency board is going to go, we got to get these people in here like fast, because there's a conflict between what the jurisdiction thinks it's real to help you get your permit to rebuild and what the insurance company is offering. Like there's a disconnect between the permit rebuilding and the insurance. And so there really does, for the greater good, need to be some innovation to make all this happen faster for people. Or they just they go into financial loss mode. It is like, do we not have enough like economic loss with COVID already that we're gonna like torture everybody who's a fire victim and have more financial losses?
Yeah, you bring up a great point that whether it's the insurance companies or the victims themselves are operating on a very different timeline than the county has been, which is why I think it's a great opportunity for the county to update its process to be something that is a little more humane, shall we say. So I'm glad you brought that urgency to the table, Marilyn, at the end here. We're out of time, but this is a huge and important topic. I'm coming away thinking, in order to get more expertise like Brad's and actually surviving this stuff, that something like a statewide rebuild council or cooperative is a necessary and great idea, something we should be looking at. In the meantime, citizens can start to create their neighborhood groups. We can get a group block captain program going. And then really we covered a lot of things tonight about getting people onto their properties faster, whether it's with porta potties or composting toilets or other off-grid options, even just as far as power use. And then really prioritizing these changes that have been talked about for a long time, and as far as getting departments to work better together, and then maybe looking at some peer review as well in order to expedite this. the processing of permits. And then of course, from the community side, I think getting common plans that people can use, maybe pre-approved designs, both for an efficiency in terms of building and time, but also in terms of cost. So great job, everyone. I know it's really the beginning of a conversation rather than the end, but thank you so much for joining me tonight. Thank you for everyone who attended in the audience, and I'm sure that this is an ongoing process and there'll be more questions, but I appreciate you guys coming together with me tonight to start hashing some of this out.
Thanks
Thank
for
you.
having us.
It's been great.
Yeah.
Thanks, Manu.
Much
Thank you.
appreciated. Take care.
All right. Good night,
Yay.
everyone.
Good night.
Bye.